The first time Evelyn Hart saw Silas Reed, she was certain she would die before she reached his door. Snow had swallowed the Wyoming trail behind her. The wind had torn loose strands of hair across her frozen face, and every step felt heavier than the last. She had been walking for hours with only a small cloth bag, $3 in coins, and a dismissal letter that could ruin any chance she had of finding respectable work. By the time she noticed the thin line of smoke rising beyond the pine trees, she could barely feel her hands. What Evelyn did not know was that the lonely cowboy inside that cabin had spent 9 years believing he needed no one. Before winter ended, both of them would learn how wrong a person could be about the life they thought they wanted. Evelyn had left the Ashford house outside Willow Bend that morning. For nearly 2 years, she had managed the large home of a wealthy cattle merchant named Warren Ashford and his wife. She organized meals, kept household accounts, supervised the servants, and handled almost every task Mrs. Ashford preferred not to think about. None of it mattered when a gold bracelet disappeared from Mrs. Ashford's bedroom. Mrs. Ashford accused Evelyn before the entire household. Evelyn denied taking it. No one believed her. By sunrise, she had been ordered off the property. She had kept her shoulders straight while walking away because pride was one of the few things poverty had not taken from her. Only when the house disappeared behind the hill did she allow herself to cry. Her plan had been simple: reach the settlement of Cedar Ridge before nightfall, find a cheap room, look for work at the hotel, schoolhouse, or general store. Then the weather changed. A gray sky turned black before noon. Wind rushed down from the mountains. Snow began falling so hard that the wagon tracks vanished beneath her boots. Evelyn kept walking. She told herself Cedar Ridge could not be far. She told herself she had survived worse. She told herself many things until the cold became stronger than her courage. When the rough wooden fence appeared through the storm, she nearly walked straight into it. Beyond the fence stood a small ranch cabin. Warm yellow light shone from one window. A barn sat farther back beside a stand of tall pines. Evelyn opened the gate. Before she reached the porch, the cabin door opened. A man stood there holding a lantern. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, with dark brown hair and a short beard touched with a little gray near his jaw. He wore a faded work shirt, heavy trousers, and boots that looked older than some towns Evelyn had passed through. His eyes moved from her face to her soaked coat, and then to the cloth bag hanging from her hand. "You're lost," he said. Evelyn stopped several feet from the porch. "I am looking for Cedar Ridge." The man's expression changed slightly. "You passed the South Trail hours ago." Her stomach dropped. "How far?" 10 miles, maybe more in this weather." Evelyn swallowed. "I see." The man watched her carefully. "You're shaking." "I'll be fine." "No, you won't." His voice was calm, almost blunt. Evelyn lifted her chin. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You're standing in a Wyoming snowstorm with blue fingers. Trouble already found you." He stepped away from the doorway. "Come inside." Evelyn hesitated. The man looked past her into the white darkness. "If you stay out there much longer, I'll be burying you when the ground thaws." That was enough. She entered. The warmth hit her so suddenly that her knees almost failed. The cabin was simple but clean. A stone fireplace filled one wall. A wooden table stood near the center with 2 chairs. Shelves held flour, coffee, dried meat, tools, and several old books. A narrow sleeping area had been built against the back wall. The man pulled a chair closer to the fire. "Sit." Evelyn sat. He poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. The drink was bitter and stronger than anything she had ever tasted, but warmth spread through her hands as she held it. "What is your name?" he asked. "Evelyn Hart." "Silas Reed." That was the entire introduction. Silas stood near the fireplace while she drank. "Where did you come from?" "The Ashford house." His eyes narrowed. "Warren Ashford's place." Yes. Why were you walking away from it in weather like this? Evelyn stared into the coffee. They dismissed me. For what? She almost told him it was none of his business. Then she remembered that she was sitting beside his fire, wearing borrowed warmth. They accused me of stealing Mrs. Ashford's bracelet. Did you? Evelyn looked up sharply. No. Silas held her gaze for several seconds. Then he nodded once. All right. She blinked. That is all. What else is there? You don't know me. No. So why believe me? Silas added another piece of wood to the fire. I didn't say I believe you. Evelyn's face tightened. He glanced at her. I said all right, there's a difference. For some reason, that answer bothered her less than false kindness would have. Outside, the wind struck the cabin hard enough to make the window shake. Silas looked toward it. You won't reach Cedar Ridge tonight. I understand. Maybe not tomorrow either. Evelyn looked toward the window. How long do storms like this last? Sometimes a night, sometimes 4 days. Her fingers tightened around the cup. Silas noticed. You can stay until the trail clears. I can sleep by the fire. You'll take the bed. I won't put you out of your own bed. You won't. His tone ended the argument. I have a cot in the storage room. Evelyn studied him. You often shelter strange women during storms. No. Something almost like amusement touched his expression. You're the first. That night Evelyn lay beneath 2 heavy blankets listening to the storm howl around the cabin. She thought about the stolen bracelet. She thought about Mrs. Ashford's accusation. She thought about Cedar Ridge and the fact that she had no recommendation letter, almost no money, and no family anywhere close enough to help. Then she thought about Silas Reed. He had spoken perhaps 50 words since she entered his house. He had not asked unnecessary questions. He had not offered pity. He had simply made coffee, added wood to the fire, and given her the safest place in the cabin. For a woman who had spent most of her life depending only on herself, that simple kindness felt strangely dangerous. Morning came with the storm still raging. Evelyn woke before sunrise and found Silas already outside. She could hear an axe striking wood beyond the wall. On the stove sat a pot of oatmeal. Beside it were 2 bowls. She stared at them. Then she set both places at the table. When Silas returned, snow covered his shoulders. He stopped when he saw the table. Neither spoke about it. They ate quietly. Halfway through breakfast, Evelyn noticed a stack of papers near one of the shelves. At the top was a territorial land map. She glanced at it only briefly. Silas noticed. You read land records. My father worked in a county clerk's office in Missouri. Silas stopped eating. He taught me bookkeeping, deeds, boundary notes, and survey marks. Silas slowly put down his spoon. For the first time since she had arrived, genuine interest appeared in his face. He stood across the room and pulled a folded document from a wooden box. I've been trying to understand this for 6 months. He placed it in front of her. Evelyn opened the paper. Silas remained standing. My northern boundary is being challenged by a cattle company from Cheyenne, he said. Their surveyor claims I'm using 50 acres that don't belong to me. Evelyn traced one faded line with her finger. Do you believe him? No. She continued reading. Several minutes passed. Then she found something written in small handwriting near the lower edge of the page. She leaned closer. Silas watched her. What? Evelyn read the note again. Then she looked at him. The surveyor is wrong. Silas went perfectly still. Evelyn turned the document toward him. Your boundary follows the western branch of Cottonwood Creek. The company is measuring from the eastern branch. Silas leaned over the table. Where does it say that? Here. She touched the faded note. His face changed. Not dramatically. Silas Reed did not seem like a man who did anything dramatically. But something in his eyes opened. I've read that paper 100 times. You were reading the measurements. What should I have been reading? The landmarks. Their eyes met. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Silas pulled out the chair across from her and sat. Evelyn. It was the first time he had used her first name. She noticed. Can you write down exactly what you just explained? Yes. Every detail. Yes. He pushed paper and pencil toward her. Outside, the storm continued swallowing the mountain. Inside, Evelyn began writing. She did not know it yet, but that one faded boundary note would give her a reason to remain in Silas Reed's cabin longer than either of them had planned. And Silas did not know that, by the time the snow finally melted, the woman he had rescued from the storm would become the one person whose absence he could no longer survive in silence. The storm stayed over the Wyoming mountains for 3 more days, and during those 3 days, Evelyn Hart discovered that Silas Reed was a man who had built his whole life around routine. He woke before sunrise, fed the horses, checked the barn, split wood, made coffee, and worked until dark. He did not waste words, and he did not seem to expect conversation. At first, Evelyn tried not to disturb that order. She stayed near the fire, helped with meals, cleaned the dishes, and studied the land papers he had given her. But by the end of the second day, she had stopped feeling like a stranger hiding from the storm, and had started noticing every small problem in the cabin that Silas had learned to ignore. His account book had not been properly balanced in almost a year. 2 shirts needed mending. The roof above the storage room had a small leak. Several sacks of grain had been purchased at prices higher than the rates listed in an old supply sheet. Evelyn did not ask permission before fixing the account book. She simply sat at the table with a pencil and began. Silas came inside that afternoon and stopped when he saw the pages spread across the table. What are you doing? Saving you money. He removed his gloves. How much? I don't know yet. He poured coffee. Then how do you know you're saving me money? Because whoever keeps these accounts is terrible at it. Silas slowly looked at her. I keep those accounts. Evelyn paused. Then she looked back down at the numbers. You are very good with cattle. For several seconds, the cabin was silent. Then Silas made a sound. It was short and rough, but Evelyn realized with surprise that he had laughed. She looked up. Silas had already turned toward the fire. That was the first time she heard him laugh. She remembered it. By the 4th morning, the wind had weakened. Snow still covered the trail, but the sky had become pale blue. Silas stood at the window and studied the mountain. Tomorrow should be clear enough to ride. Evelyn's hand stopped over the account book. To Cedar Ridge. Yes. The answer was simple. It should have brought relief. Instead, something heavy settled inside her. She told herself it was fear about finding work, nothing more. That evening, Silas cooked venison while Evelyn finished writing the explanation of his boundary claim. When she placed the pages in front of him, he read every line carefully. This could help you if the company takes the dispute to court, she said. Silas looked at the pages. You did all this in 3 days. My father taught me well. You miss him? Evelyn's expression changed. He died when I was 14. Silas nodded. He did not say he was sorry. For some reason, she was grateful. After a while, she asked, What about your family? Silas kept his eyes on the fire. My parents are gone. Brothers. One died in a cattle accident when I was 20. Evelyn hesitated. Were you always alone? His face became still. No. She waited. Silas finally sat across from her. I was supposed to marry once. Evelyn said nothing. Her name was Anna. Fever took her 9 years ago. The fire cracked between them. I came up here after she died. And never left. I went to town when I had to. You know what I mean. His eyes met hers. Yes. Evelyn looked down at her hands. Did being alone help? For a while. And now? Silas was quiet so long she thought he would not answer. Then he said, I don't know. The next morning the sky cleared. Silas saddled one of his horses and packed Evelyn's bag behind the saddle. He would take her as far as Cedar Ridge. Evelyn stood beside the cabin door wearing her coat and the wool scarf he had given her. She looked at the small room behind her. The table. The fire. The 2 bowls. She hated how much leaving already felt like losing something. Silas came from the barn. You ready? Yes. He studied her face. You don't sound ready. I am. He nodded. Then he looked toward the trail. I need supplies from Cedar Ridge. Evelyn waited. Flour, salt, lamp oil. All right. If you still need somewhere to stay afterward, you can bring them back. Evelyn stared at him. Silas kept his attention on the saddle strap. I could use help with the papers, he added. She understood exactly what he was doing. He was giving her a reason to return without making her feel like she was receiving charity. How long? He tightened the strap. Until you find something better. The words hurt more than she expected. But she nodded. I'll bring the supplies back. She returned 2 days later. Silas was repairing a fence when he saw her coming up the trail. He did not wave. He did not smile. He simply stood there holding a hammer while she rode closer. But Evelyn saw the way his shoulders relaxed. She saw it. And she carried that small knowledge into the cabin with her. The days became weeks. Winter slowly weakened. Evelyn told herself she was staying because Silas needed help with the land dispute. Silas told himself she was staying because the roads were still dangerous. Neither explanation survived March. By then the snow had begun melting along the lower slopes. The creek ran loud behind the cabin. The days became longer and still Evelyn stayed. She balanced his accounts. She wrote letters concerning the boundary dispute. She planted onions and beans in a small garden beside the cabin. Silas built a wooden frame over part of the garden after she explained that glass could protect early plants from frost. They argued about the angle of the roof. Evelyn said it needed more sunlight. Silas said it needed more strength. They rebuilt it twice. On the second afternoon, they both reached for the same hammer. Their hands touched. Neither moved for 1 second. Then Silas pulled his hand away. You take it. Evelyn picked up the hammer. Her heart beat too fast for several minutes afterward. She hated that he probably noticed. She hated more that she hoped he did. One evening in April, Silas came home later than usual. Evelyn heard his horse before she saw him. She stepped onto the porch. He rode slowly into the yard, his face tired. What happened? The cattle company sent another letter. Inside, he placed it on the table. Evelyn read it. The company was no longer asking questions about the boundary. Now they were offering Silas money for the disputed land, while warning that a legal fight could cost him much more. They're afraid, Evelyn said. Silas looked at her. They don't sound afraid. They are. If they believed the land belonged to them, they wouldn't offer to buy it. Silas leaned against the table. They've made the same offers to 3 ranchers north of here. Evelyn looked up sharply. 3. Yes. Do their properties connect with yours? All along the same valley. Evelyn stood. Then this isn't about 50 acres. Silas's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? They want the whole northern strip. She spread the map across the table. Silas moved beside her. Their shoulders nearly touched. If they control all 4 properties, Evelyn said, tracing the valley with her finger, they control the easiest route through these hills. For what? I don't know. Silas stared at the map. Then his expression hardened. A railroad? Evelyn looked at him. There was talk in Cedar Ridge about a new freight line from Cheyenne. Silas's jaw tightened. They're trying to push 4 ranchers off their land for a railroad route. Yes. For the next week, Evelyn worked almost without stopping. Silas rode to neighboring ranches and returned with copies of deeds, survey notes, and old land records. Evelyn read all of them. By the end of the week, she had written a joint complaint for the Territorial Land Office. Silas stood behind her chair as she finished the last page. You think this can stop them? If the records are honest. And if they're not? She looked up at him. Then we make them honest. Something changed in his face. Pride. Not pride in himself. Pride in her. You should have been a lawyer, he said. Women don't become lawyers around here. Maybe around here is wrong. Evelyn looked at him. Silas seemed to realize what he had said. He turned toward the fire. That night, neither of them slept quickly. Then Cedar Ridge began talking. People had noticed Evelyn was still living at the Reed Ranch. The first visitor was a widow named Martha Bell, who arrived carrying an apple pie and wearing a smile that was much too interested. Evelyn knew what kind of visit it was almost immediately. Martha talked to Silas about church gatherings, spring dances, and how difficult it must be for a man to manage a home alone. She looked at Evelyn only occasionally. Each look asked the same question. Why are you still here? After Martha left, Silas put the pie on the table. I don't like apple pie. Evelyn stared at him. You ate 2 pieces of mine last month. That was different. How? He looked at her. You made it. Evelyn turned away before he could see her smile. More women came. Some were polite. Some were curious. One asked whether Evelyn planned to marry Silas. Evelyn answered calmly that she planned to finish the land petition. The woman looked disappointed. But the questions grew sharper. Soon Evelyn began understanding the danger. Not danger to her. She had survived gossip before. Danger to Silas. He had neighbors, business relationships, a reputation built over years. She was an unmarried woman living under his roof. People would decide what they wanted to believe. Evelyn started thinking about leaving. She hated herself for it. One night in early May, she waited until Silas finished supper. Then she placed her hands together on the table. I found a teaching position. Silas stopped drinking his coffee. Where? Colorado. His eyes stayed on her. How far? Far enough. When? I could leave next week. Silas set the cup down. Why? The roads are clear now. That isn't what I asked. Evelyn looked at the fire. The town is talking. I know. It will get worse. I don't care. I do. His jaw tightened. Why? Because you gave me shelter when no one else would. You trusted me with your land and your home. I won't repay that by becoming the reason people turn against you. You're deciding what I can afford without asking me. Evelyn looked at him. Silas. No. It was the strongest word he had ever used with her. You don't get to decide what losing you costs me. The room became perfectly silent. Both of them heard what he had said. Silas looked away first. Evelyn's eyes filled, but she forced the tears back. What are you saying? Silas opened his mouth. Nothing came. For the first time since she had met him, the man who always spoke plainly could not find a single word. That frightened her more than anything, because she knew if he found those words, she might never be able to leave. So 3 mornings later, before sunrise, Evelyn packed her small cloth bag. She stood beside the table in the gray darkness and wrote one short note. Thank you for giving me a place where I finally felt safe. She left it beside the coffee pot. Then she opened the door. For one terrible moment, she almost turned back. She imagined Silas waking. She imagined him asking her to stay. She knew she would. So she stepped outside before courage could fail her. When Silas returned from checking the eastern pasture after sunrise, the cabin felt wrong before he even understood why. Her coat was gone. Her bag was gone. Her chair was pushed beneath the table. Then he saw the note. Silas picked it up. He read it once. Then again. He stood beside the cold fireplace for a long time. That night he lay awake listening to the mountain. The next night he did the same. And the next. For 9 years, Silas Reed had believed loneliness was peace. It took Evelyn Hart only a few months to teach him the difference. By the end of the first week without her, he understood something that frightened him more than losing 50 acres, more than the cattle company, more than any winter storm. He could survive without Evelyn. But survival was no longer enough. For the first few days after Evelyn left, Silas tried to live exactly as he had before she came. He woke before sunrise, he fed the horses, he checked the fences, he split wood, he made coffee, he worked until his shoulders hurt. None of it helped. The cabin had not changed, but everything inside it felt wrong. Her chair was still at the table. The small garden beside the cabin still carried the first green shoots she had planted. The account book was balanced in her neat handwriting. The land petition sat on the shelf. Everywhere Silas looked, there was proof that Evelyn had been there. At night, the silence became unbearable. He had lived alone for 9 years. He had believed he understood loneliness. He had been wrong. Before Evelyn, silence had been empty. After Evelyn, silence had a shape. It was the missing sound of her moving beside the stove. The missing scrape of her chair against the floor. The missing voice asking him why he had bought too much grain, or why he was trying to fix something without the proper tool. On the 4th night, Silas woke at 2 in the morning. He stared at the ceiling. Then he sat up. He stayed at the table until sunrise with a cup of coffee going cold in his hands. 3 weeks passed. Then a rider came from Cedar Ridge. His name was Everett Cole, one of the ranchers whose land was included in the petition Evelyn had written. Everett entered the cabin carrying a folded paper. The land office accepted the complaint. Silas looked up. What does that mean? It means the company has to answer all 4 claims together. Silas took the paper. Everett sat across from him. The clerk in Cheyenne said whoever wrote the petition understood those old surveys better than most attorneys. Silas looked toward the shelf. That was Evelyn. Everett nodded slowly. The woman who stayed here. Yes. Where is she? Colorado. Everett studied him. You know where? Silas did not answer immediately. She took a teaching position. Everett leaned back. You should write to her. Silas stared at the paper. He finally said, I don't know what to write. Everett almost smiled. That sounds like a problem a man has to solve himself. After Everett left, Silas sat at the table with paper and pencil. He wrote Evelyn's name. Then nothing else. He tried again that night. He told her the petition had been accepted. He told her the beans were growing. He told her the north fence was holding. He did not tell her he had not slept properly since she left. He mailed the letter anyway. Her answer came almost a month later. She was teaching in a small town called Pine Hollow, Colorado. She wrote about the schoolhouse, the children, the widow whose boarding house she rented a room in, and the mountains beyond town. Near the bottom, she wrote one sentence that Silas read 6 times. I hope the mornings at the ranch are peaceful. Silas stared at those words. Peaceful? He almost laughed. Nothing had been peaceful since she left. He wrote back. Soon they began exchanging letters every few weeks. Neither said what mattered. They wrote about practical things. The land case. The garden. The school. The weather. Once Evelyn asked whether Silas had repaired the loose barn door. He wrote back that he had. She replied that she was surprised. He smiled for the first time in days. Summer passed. In September, the land case reached a territorial hearing. Silas traveled to Cheyenne with Everett Cole and the other 2 ranchers. Their attorney used Evelyn's notes to prove that the cattle company had deliberately measured the wrong creek branches in all 4 surveys. The company argued. The attorney answered. Every answer had already been written in Evelyn's careful hand months earlier. 4 days later, the ruling came. All 4 original boundaries were confirmed. The cattle company's claim was rejected. Silas rode home with the official paper in his saddlebag. That evening he sat at the table and wrote to Evelyn. We won. He stared at the words, then added more. All 4 ranches kept their land. Your work protected every family involved. He paused. He wanted to stop there. Instead, he kept writing. There is something else I should have said before you left. He stared at the sentence. His hand tightened around the pencil. Then he wrote the truth. I have not slept one full night since you left. He stopped. That looked foolish on paper. He almost crossed it out. He did not. He continued. I thought I was used to being alone. I learned I was only used to not knowing what I was missing. Silas read the letter twice. Then he folded it. He did not mail it. For 3 days it stayed in his shirt pocket. On the 4th morning, he rode to Cedar Ridge and sent it. That night he slept better than he had in months. 2 weeks later, Evelyn's reply arrived. It was short. Silas, I read your letter 3 times. I don't know what to say except that I have not slept well either. I miss the ranch. I miss the coffee. I miss you. Silas stood in the post office holding the paper. He read the last 3 words again. I miss you. He turned and walked directly to the stable. By afternoon, he had packed 2 saddlebags. Everett Cole found him tightening the saddle straps. Where are you going? Colorado. Everett looked at the bags. How far? About 500 miles. Everett nodded. Then you better stop talking to me and start writing. Silas left before sunset. The journey took almost 3 weeks. He crossed cold rivers, slept beneath trees, rode through rain, and changed horses twice. For the first time in years, he did not care about doing anything slowly. He only cared about reaching Pine Hollow. When he finally rode into town, autumn had already touched the trees. The boarding house was a white wooden building near the school. A woman named Mrs. Dalton answered the door. She looked at Silas. Mr. Reed. He froze. How do you know my name? Mrs. Dalton gave him a small smile. Evelyn receives letters from only one cowboy in Wyoming. Silas removed his hat. Is she here? At the school, she'll return soon. He waited in the front room. Waiting was harder than riding 500 miles. At 5 in the afternoon, he heard Evelyn's voice outside. Then the door opened. She stepped inside carrying books. She saw him. The books almost slipped from her hands. Silas. He stood. For a moment, neither moved. Then Evelyn slowly placed the books on a table. What are you doing here? Silas held his hat in both hands. I came to talk to you. You rode here? Yes. From Wyoming? Yes. Her eyes were already bright. Silas took one step closer. I had a speech planned. That almost made her smile. What happened to it? I saw you. Evelyn looked down. Silas continued. I thought I understood what I wanted from life. I thought quiet meant peace. I thought needing nobody made me strong. He swallowed. I was wrong. Evelyn looked back at him. Silas's voice became lower. I can't sleep without you. Her face changed. A tear slipped down before she could stop it. Silas stepped closer. I wake every night expecting to hear you in the next room. I listen for your footsteps. I look at your chair. I make too much coffee because I still think there should be 2 cups. Evelyn covered her mouth with one hand. He continued. I don't want you to come back because you need shelter. He paused. I want you to come back because I need you. More tears filled her eyes. Silas reached for her hands. She let him take them. I left because I thought staying would cost you too much, she whispered. It did. Her face fell. Silas tightened his hands around hers. Losing you cost more. Evelyn cried then. Not quietly. Not carefully. All the tears she had held back since leaving Wyoming finally came. Silas pulled her against him. She pressed her face against his chest. I missed you, she said. I know. I hated every morning without that cabin. I know. I hated your weak letters. Silas looked down at her. My letters were not weak. They were terrible. He almost smiled. They were accurate. Evelyn laughed through her tears. That sound broke the last wall between them. Silas lifted one hand to her face. Come home with me. She looked at him. As what? He went still. This was the question. The one he had ridden 500 miles to answer. Silas took a breath. As my wife. Evelyn stared at him. He continued before fear could stop him. I don't want to offer you shelter anymore. I want to offer you a life. The ranch, the work, the garden, the trouble, all of it. A small smile appeared through her tears. The bad accounts. I've improved. Not much. Evelyn. She laughed again. Then her expression softened. The school needs me until the end of the month. I'll wait. I want to keep teaching. Then we'll build a school in Cedar Ridge. She stared at him. Silas shrugged slightly. You already proved you can make people sign petitions. Evelyn looked down at their hands. Then back at him. Yes. Silas did not move. Yes. Yes, Silas. His face changed completely. For the first time, Evelyn saw him smile without trying to hide it. They married 2 weeks later in a small church in Pine Hollow. Mrs. Dalton attended. So did several of Evelyn's students. After the ceremony, they rode north. When the Wyoming mountains appeared, Evelyn became quiet. Silas did not ask why. He knew. 3 days later, they reached the ranch. The same fence stood beside the road. The same cabin waited beneath the pines. Evelyn climbed down from her horse. She looked at the window. Smoke rose from the chimney. Silas had asked Everett to prepare the place before they arrived. Evelyn turned toward him. You planned that? Yes. You are learning. I've always been capable of planning. She smiled. They went inside. The cabin was warm. 2 cups sat beside the coffee pot. Evelyn touched one. Silas stood behind her. Home, he said. She looked at him. Home, she agreed. That winter, Cedar Ridge approved a permanent school after 14 families signed Evelyn's petition. By spring, Silas and 3 neighboring ranchers had repaired an abandoned meeting hall. Evelyn became the town's first full-time teacher. The land stayed with the families who had worked it. The garden beside the cabin grew larger. Silas built another room onto the east wall. Then another table, because the first one became too small for all the neighbors who started visiting. Years later, people in Cedar Ridge would still tell the story of the winter Evelyn Hart walked through a lonely cowboy's gate during a snowstorm. Some said Silas saved her life that night. Evelyn always corrected them. He gave me warmth, she would say. Then she would look across the room at the quiet man who still made coffee too strong. But we saved each other. And some nights, when the mountain wind moved around the cabin and the fire burned low, Evelyn would wake and find Silas's hand resting over hers. She would ask softly, "Can't sleep?" He would open his eyes. "Not without you." And Evelyn would smile, because now she understood exactly what he meant. He was not talking about sleep. He was talking about home,